green-white aggro, but it's kind of been on the fringes of the metagame, having a good run this tournament in the hand of Andrew Boswell.
Yeah, Andy Boswell he's been playing this deck longer than I have, actually. He played it at Pro Tour Theros in Dublin. He's been tinkering with it on and off ever since. He actually won the Pennsylvania State Championships last week with this deck. With not quite this list, but this is a deck, an archetype that he is very, very familiar with, and one that he has actually had a good amount of success with.
Eric Johnson, he's on the right-hand side. He's playing Red, White, Burn, and his list incorporating the big change that we saw in the Knoxville Open, 4 main deck copies of Eidolon of the Great Revel.
And that is going to trigger on literally every spell in Andy Boswell's deck. So, yeah, that's all right.
And Andrew can't easily kill an Eidolon either, so.
He has 2 Banishing Light. Those are his only main deck answers, and a 3rd Banishing Light in the board. That will do it.
So you see Mana Confluence here from Andrew in the first play of the game, a Voice of Resurgence. Pretty annoying threat for Burn to play against.
Voice of Resurgence, absolutely. It's one of the only threat that you really have to deal with twice, the exception being if you have Chain to the Rocks. Now, Voice of Resurgence, bad news for Eric Johnson. The good news, Mana Confluence. This is a card that green-white players were very excited, at least I know I was, to be able to consistently cast your spells, but you love this card in every matchup except for Burn.
Yeah. So you see Eric here with a Magma Jet in response to the Voice of Resurgence here. He's figuring out a scry, and this has the makings of a 2 ships passing in the night sort of game here between Eric and Andrew.
Sure. Yeah. Burn decks in Standard have that style of play frequently. You don't really play Magic with your opponent so much as you play Magic at your opponent.
Yeah. There's some matchups where it can play kind of a creature and removal strategy, but in the face of Voice of Resurgence, Eric's probably going to already shift to Plan B.
Mm-hmm.
So you see Searing Blood here, take down the Voice of Resurgence, and knock Andrew down to 14.
Yep. And Searing Blood, one of the cards that actually fits plans A and B here. Eric gets to continue pressuring Andrew's life total, but also deal with his plays on board.
By far the biggest addition to Burn strategies in Standard in the last couple of sets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that these Burn decks kind of pass in the night, as you said. I think one of the strong suits, actually, like one of the real appeals to this style of deck is that it can default to ignoring its opponent, but it doesn't have to by any means. Its deck is full of Burn, its deck is full of basically combo pieces, resolve this many Burn spells, you win the game. But it's also full of removal spells, but they're the same cards. Yep. So like you have a lot of flexibility there.
So you see Andrew there on the 3rd turn add a Rogue's Passage to his board and a Loxodon Smiter. This turns his elemental token into a 2/2, knocks Eric down to 18, but Andrew falls all the way down to 13 using his Mana Confluence to cast the Smiter.
Yeah, and that 13 is not much on turn 3, and it's only getting worse. So Boswell basically just has to try and close this game out as fast as he can. Now I did a deck tick with him earlier, and he talked a lot about that. He had built his deck where possible to try and ignore the opponent in his own way, just be as aggressive as possible, try to close things out. So his deck is geared to do that. He does have the Ajani in his hand, which is going to be his most reliable means of doing that. So that represents kind of a virtual 8 there.
So Eric there on the 4th turn just plays a Mutavault, suspiciously passes with 4 mana available. Now Andrew with the Plains on his turn and trying to mull over his options here. Trying to, as you mentioned, try to figure out a way to end the game as quickly as possible.
Conspicuous, that 4 mana, that represents War Leader's Helix, which is the only instant speed answer that Eric could have to a Loxodon Smiter. The only 1 card instant speed answer.
So if you're in Andrew's spot right here, do you do something like play Ajani and put a counter or flying and double strike the Smiter, knowing that it's likely to die just to basically eat up Eric's turn and take away one of those War Leader's Helix?
I mean, the War Leader's Helix is getting cast, I think. There's not much getting around that.
Well, I mean at the Smiter rather than Andrew's head.
Sure. Yeah, I think you would actually, you want, if at all possible, to make sure the War Leader's Helix doesn't go to your head. Now, having said that, you want to make it as bad as possible for it to target. You want to get in that sweet spot where you give up as little value as possible when the Loxodon Smiter eats War Leader's Helix, but Eric still has to do it. So if I'm in that spot, if I choose to play Ajani, I would definitely put a counter on the voice token there, I think.
So Andrew just attacks for 6, knocking Eric down to 12. plays a Fleece main line post-combat. Eric end a turn with a Warlord's Helix, knocking Andrew down to 8.
Basically, Boswell priced him out there. Yeah, put him in a position where Eric felt like the War Leader's Helix was best targeted at Andrew himself.
So Eric again just with a land and passes the turn back. Andrew draws a card. Eric had a comfortable 16 life here.
Yeah, War Leader's Helix does some work. And Andrew has 10 points of damage on board. That Ajani's still there. So the Ajani could jump and double strike the Loxodon Smiter to hit for 8. The other 2 creatures can be stopped with a Mutavault. So we're not closing this out this turn. And Eric sits with, I believe that is 2 cards in hand.
Yes.
Yeah, Andrew can safely assume that at least one of them is going to be more end step burned. So Andrew is certainly at the point in the game where he has to consider the real possibility that he will not get to untap again.
So Andrew trying to find some way to close the game out this turn, plays Ajani Call of the Pride.
And now we're at that same crossroads. If you put a +1/+1 counter on Smiter or Jump and Pump It, and looks like that's what he's going to do, that makes War Leader's Helix very, very good against the Smiter. On the other hand, it makes it so that Eric maybe doesn't have to actually, but strongly feels the need to War Leader's Helix the Smiter in response, which that's 4 points that are not going to go at Andrew's head if he does that.
So the flying and double strike minus power of Ajani's on the stack here, targeting the Smiter. Looks like Eric's going to let that go, and now here comes the Alpha Strike from Andrew, sending in his 3/3 Elemental Token, Fleece Mane Lion, and Loxodon Smiter.
Big swings, not lethal swings. Even if Eric declines to block with any of his Mutavaults, that is only coming in for 14. And so Eric now considers, if I War Leader's Helix Andrew's face, I knock him to 4. I then have lethal on board with just the Mutavaults. I think he has to be concerned that there's going to be a follow-up blocker there, but nearly any burn spell solves the problem here as well.
So it looks like Eric's just going to take it all on the chin here.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I believe I saw a Selesnya Charm in Andrew's hand, so this was actually kind of a trap that Andrew laid, and Eric definitely avoided it. I think really wanted to draw the War Leader's Helix pre-combat so that he could respond with Selesnya Charm, and then the 6/6 double striker actually would be lethal.
Yeah. So, never mind, Andrew going to go for his play here. It looks like Selesnya Charm on the Smiter.
Okay. Yeah, and of course that is lethal, so Eric has to use the War Leader's Helix at that point.
So had Eric been willing to chump block with one of the Mutavaults, he would not have had to use the War Leader's Helix in that manner.
Yes, he would have been taking 12 in the air, another 3 only, and going to just 1, and then actually a virtual 5 from the life gain. So, yeah, if he had blocked once, then he gets much better value out of the War Leader's Helix.
But it is all for naught as the 2 Mutavaults come across uncontested, knocking Andrew down to 3, and Skullcrack finishes off. So Eric Johnson quickly up a game here against Andrew Boswell.
And Boswell is, let's see, he does have the token 3 Unflinching Courage. That's a pretty stock aspect of any green-white aggro deck sideboard. He will be eager to bring those in. He has a 1 of Archangel of Thune, so that's a pretty big one as well. Other than that, a 1 of Banishing Light, a 1 of Glare of Heresy. We might see him turn to those as answers to Chain to the Rocks, but I don't love it. I suspect those will be his additions. I don't see any other reasonable options.
On the other side of the table here, Eric Johnson, 4 copies of Fire Drinker Satyr, 2 Ash Zealots, 1 in the main deck, 2 Wear Terror, 2 Satyr Fire Dancer, a Spark Trooper, a Shock, a Banishing Light, a Chain of the Rock, and a Dictate of the Twin Gods. Gotta like the Chain of the Rocks here, and especially gotta like Satyr Fire Dancer.
Yeah, for sure. The Satyr Fire Dancer, that's a card that some burn decks actually play at main, but the ones that don't, they almost always have it in the board. It's for situations like this. Again, I mentioned that burn decks have the option of interacting. If you have Satyr Fire Dancer in play, you get to do both.
Yeah.
You get to kill your opponent and interact, so which is a huge advantage. The real question to me is how much Boswell has to assume those cards are coming. Well, that the Fire Dancers are coming. How does he board with that knowledge? Do you go to Banishing Light, which doesn't have a lot of other targets?
Yeah, I don't think you can really mess around with that kind of stuff. I think that, you have the option of things like Unflinching Courage to just kind of outpace it and or just get out in front of it pretty significantly. But I think it's tough to try to fight that kind of fight because it's so important for Andrew just to get on the ground fast.
Sure.
And all the removal that he has can lead to draws where he just doesn't have enough pressure, or there's one chain of the rock to break up what he's doing, and Eric can kind of win at his own leisure.
Okay. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree there. This is a build that is designed to be fast. It's designed to ignore the opponent as well as it can. And I think you can play to those strengths. He's going to bring in the 3 Unflinching, the 1 Archangel Thune, for sure. And it looks like he has... His deck is actually very redundant in his main deck. All his cards are kind of the same. They're just cheap animals.
Yeah.
There's the 1 Boon Satyr. I think that's a safe cut. Other than that, I'm not really sure. I'm leaning towards trimming these Bremazes, actually.
They're a little bit on the slow side. Is there a way that you can sideboard with this deck to try to mitigate the damage that Searing Blood does? You mentioned the Boon Satyr. Searing Blood is a really valuable tool for burn decks trying to fight creature decks. You saw it in that game be very important for Eric. Is there a way you can sideboard with this deck, or are you just sort of priced into having Searing Blood be good against you?
With this particular build, I'm honestly, I don't think that there is a way. Certain lists, they might have enough X3s that they could swing it. Boswell has 4 Soldier of the Pantheon and 4 Experiment 1. That stock, the Experiment 1s can get out of Searing Blood range, but they are certainly on turn 2 almost always in Searing Blood range. He has 2 Dryad Militants, so 10 total 1-drops that can be Searing Blooded, and then 2 Scavenging Ooze on top of that, and the 4 Voice, of course. So that's 16, I believe.
So the answer is no.
Probably not, yeah. And then the 4 Knights from Selesnya Charm as well, so roughly 20-ish. So yeah, you can, and to be fair, getting that down to like 8 or so, that's mitigation in its own way. You would have to board in, we have the 3 Unflinching, the Archangels. You could go for the 1 of Banishing Light. You could bring in 3 Advent of the Worm. You cannot Searing Blood an Advent of the Worm.
This is true.
So that's one way of doing it, but that's completely going in the opposite direction from I think the kind of the author's intent of this list. Yeah, Boswell wants to be on the ground and attacking.
And definitely, the 1-drops versus the 2-drops are a very different animal, especially with Andrew being on the play. Getting a 1-drop into play and getting to hit twice before it gets Searing Blood is much different than being on the draw and casting your Scavenging Ooze and having that get tagged.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think Boswell minds exactly losing one guy as long as he still has attackers. In fact, with this particular build, I almost wonder if he wouldn't prefer being Searing Blooded on turn 2 than to have an Eidolon or an Ash Zealot come down.
Or a Fire Dancer.
Certainly. Fire Dancer on turn 2, the worst case, yes. And it looks like I do not see a Fire Dancer, so he doesn't have to worry about that.
Well, it looks like Eric has left in a lot of his Skull Cracks. Not that they're best against creature decks, but when you reasonably can expect Unflinching Courage, potentially a very valuable tool there.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of experience with burn decks in this standard format, but my inclination is that you actually just can't afford to board out Skullcrack in any matchup. And I could be wrong about that, but it's kind of the same way that like there are certain broad answers like the Tension Sphere that you can never afford to board out when you're the control deck, because you just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what curveballs are going to be thrown at you. Players will find weird ways to gain life.
Yeah, to me, it's kind of the difference of, is it happening in big chunks or is it happening incrementally? Skullcrack's really good at fighting, say, Blood Baron of Viscopa, because it's an entire turn. It's good at fighting Unflinching Courage, although that can be happening much faster. Sometimes Skullcrack isn't good enough there.
Yeah.
When your opponent is saying, activating Scavenging Ooze, putting in a line of play with Courser Crewfix, triggering Staff of the Death Magus. Those are scenarios where Skullcrack doesn't really provide that much utility.
Okay.
So a lot of it just has to do with, do you expect your opponent to be getting life in large chunks, or do you expect them to be doing it kind of piecemeal? The more that they're in the second camp, the more Skullcrack can be put on the sidelines. But when it's the first camp, Skullcrack's usually pretty good. Now, it's a little bit different here because Andrew is just capable of out-racing Eric, actually.
Yes.
So having totally non-interactive cards is a little bit dangerous, but the fact that you can expect Unflinching Courage, I think, makes them a little bit better.
Yeah, as far as surprise ways to gain life out of the sideboard go, Unflinching Courage is not a surprise. I think every burn player knows that if there are Temple Gardens in your deck, you need to have a plan for Unflinching Courage.
And Andrew starts out the game with a basic forest and a Dryad Militant.
Just flagrantly exposing himself to Searing Blood.
Kind of yes, kind of no.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah. And has the follow-up. Okay, so and there is the Searing Blood. So, we can't cast it.
No second red mana there for Eric. Just a Mutavault, but he does have Magma Jet to take care of one of those Dry Militants. He's going to scry, looks at a Sacred Foundry, another Mountain.
Mm-hmm. Certainly keeps at least one of those. I might keep both, actually. I could see wanting to cast two, like, I could see casting 2 spells on turn 4 being like a crucial turning point in this game.
Yeah, it's tough because drawing the 5th land is so bad,
yeah.
But it may be worth locking up the 4th land it may be worth that risk.
Mm-hmm.
So Eric is going to set both on top, it appears. Andrew untaps and draws.
And this, as I said, as long as Boswell gets to have one guy out and attacking ahead of Eric Johnson's interaction, I don't think he is necessarily unhappy with the way the game goes. The question is, how long can he keep it up? And it looks like he definitely has options here. I see an Experiment 1. If he has a 2-drop to follow that up with, then he really gets out ahead of the removal.
Yep. Yeah, being able to outpace Eric, keeping his board in check, or just the damage race in general because of Searing Bloods and Warrior's Helixes, feels like the key to the game for Andrew.
And considers his options. These matchups are so tense in a way because like sequencing correctly on turns 2 and 3 are never more important than they are in matchups like these.
So just going to be Experiment 1 here, and Andrew passes with his Temple Garden and his Forest up. Andrew takes the draw. It's the Mountain.
Okay, now can cast Searing Blood. Can cast it, but Andrew conspicuously leaves a green and a white up, so he has to worry about Selesnya Charm.
Now the race is on from Eric's side here as a Mountain and a Chandra's Phoenix comes into play.
Yep. Consistent source of damage, which is important broadly, but he's certainly losing this race on board. So again, like not interacting for a turn is a risk. I believe he did leave that other land on top though, so he's going to get to cast 2 spells next turn.
Potentially, I mean, red mana may be bottleneck depending on what he wants to cast.
Sure. Well, we know he has a Searing Blood and a Magma Jet, I believe. So he can cast both of those.
So Andrew plays a Temple of Plenty, scries, attacks with the Experiment 1 and the Dry Militant for 3, and post-combat uses a Banishing Light to take care of the Chandra's Phoenix.
Okay. So does leave it, at least leave in some removal. He has 2 of those Banishing Lights in the main, and concerned, of course, about Satyr Fire Dancer, expecting at least Chandra's Phoenix and probably a 4 of some other creature. Leaves a little bit of removal in and gets to deal with Chandra's Phoenix there.
And the Phoenix is pretty hard for Andrew's deck to remove otherwise.
Mm-hmm. It's the only way. Yeah, he can virtually remove it by slapping an Unflinching Courage on something and going to town and racing it, negating it in a way. But to actually get it out of play, those Vanishing Lights are the only way.
All right. Eric contemplating, decides to go with an untapped Sacred Foundry. We'll see what kind of inroads he wants to make on Andrew's board this turn. Just Searing Blood on the Dry Militant.
Yeah, Boswell being tapped out is... It's definitely got to be appealing to just get both of those creatures off the board.
All right, so that's going to kill the Militant. Andrew will take 3.
And then Eric, his other option there was Eidolon of the Great Revel, which, as I mentioned, actually triggers on literally every spell in Andrew's deck, so it's a powerful play. Did I misread his hand? Does he not have Magma Jet there?
He does. I think he's just passing.
Okay. That seems ambitious to me.
So here's a Scavenging Ooze here. That's going to prompt some sort of response here from Eric.
I mean, I think you have to... If you were going to Magma Jet that Experiment 1, I think you wanted to do it while Andrew was tapped out. You're kind of exposing yourself unnecessarily by waiting.
Well, I think that Andrew may have been representing a threat light hand here, and Eric if he didn't have to use the Magma Jet, would have preferred to use it just on Andrew at the end of the turn.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Imagine that he has no creatures left in play. You want to Searing Blood the Experiment 1 and use the Magma Jet elsewhere. So
okay. So you're just kind of thinking long term,
Yeah.
like where am I going to assemble 15 if Andrew's at 15?
right.
Okay.
It costs you very little, I think, to wait, and the upside could be huge if Andrew has nothing. Also, Eric has a Mutavault up, so if Andrew literally has nothing, he's not even going to attack with the Experiment 1. So you find out everything soon enough. Yeah, maybe it gets Selesnya Charm, maybe it stays alive, but I feel like it's still worth the risk in that spot.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I just assumed that Andrew had Selesnya Charm when he passes, when he only makes a 1-drop on turn 3 and passes with that conspicuous 2 mana up. Maybe that's kind of railroading a little bit, but I don't think I would have ever for a second considered the idea that he didn't have Selesnya Charm there. It turns out he didn't, I suppose.
So Andrew going to use his spot now to gain 2 life and turn his Scavenging Ooze into a 4/4 here, exiling some of his Dryad Militants. Pass the turn back to Eric.
Yeah, and actually getting to get some use out of Scavenging Ooze is pretty big too. As a 4/4, you put Eric in a situation where he generally has to use 2 cards to deal with Scavenging Ooze, with certain exceptions, but they're very powerful cards. You know, like Chain of the Rocks would be good here because your Chain of the Rocks doesn't do anything other than remove big creatures. But if you put Eric in a spot where he has to blow a War Leader's Helix on Scavenging Ooze.
So you see there, Eric firing up the Mutavault and attacking. Andrew unwilling to block with the Scavenging Ooze. Andrew falls to 15. Plays an Eidolon of the Great Rebels post-combat. Andrew untaps, quickly attacks with the Scavenging Ooze. Uses the Scavenging Ooze to exile the Experiment 1, the last creature in either player's graveyard, attacking Eric for 5. And here is Fleecemane Lion. That's going to trigger the Eidolon.
And at this stage in the game, Andrew has much more life to play with. Eric has sort of locked himself out with this Eidolon.
Yeah, he's got Mutavaults to chump block with, but it is tough.
Yes. Like if the Scavenging Ooze connects, then Eric never gets to cast a spell again.
Well, he gets to cast War Leader's Helix, potentially.
Okay, sure.
Which is probably part of any recipe that involves him coming back in this game regardless.
That is true. So if you're Eric here, you're basically playing to some running Helixes.
Yep. I mean, even just one Helix might give you enough of a swing here. You still got your Mutavaults to chump block with.
True. And letting Boswell untap also gives him an opportunity now to monstrous that Fleecemane Lion.
So Eric just passes the turn. He's going to start things off here with a pre-combat Voice of Resurgence. Going to try to force Eric's hand.
It's an interesting give and take there. He does trigger the Eidolon and lose 2 life by doing that pre-combat. You have to consider the real possibility that Eidolon is going to be used as a chump blocker when you attack. So you're kind of giving up 2 life there, but you also gain a lot of information.
Yeah. So we're going to see how Eric wants to block here. He has the option of chump blocking the Fleecemane Lion and the Scavenging Ooze. He can try to triple block the Scavenging Ooze and get off the table. A lot of different lines here available to Eric.
I don't love any of them though. Like triple blocking, it's weird because you have to deal with the Scavenging Ooze, right? If you don't triple block it, then I feel like you're only ever going to win this game if you draw Chain to the Rocks to deal with the Scavenging Ooze. But we don't need to draw Chain to the Roxes. We need to draw War Leader's Helixes.
Yeah.
So kind of, again, like adding cards to the recipe, I think.
So it looks like just a double block here on the Scavenging Ooze. Fleecemane Lion is going to come across. That knocks Eric down to 3.
Huh. Okay, so double block suggests he intends to use a burn spell. There is that voice in play, so and Andrew does not miss it.
So this is going to be an end of turn Searing Blood to try to finish off the Scavenging Ooze. That's going to trigger Voice of Resurgence. And Andrew's going to take this opportunity to exile that Eidolon. Gain 1 last life with this Ooze on the way out.
And Eric very much with his back against the wall here. Yeah, I am pretty sure that Eric didn't miss that voice so much as he just had to play as if Andrew was going to. That's how that play felt to me.
Well, the problem is that if Eric just goes pre-combat Searing Blood your Scavenging Ooze, what ends up happening is Andrew goes, okay, that's fine, attack with only Fleecemane Lion.
Right.
And then the Ooze survives, and so there wasn't a lot for Eric to do in that situation, and we're going to be going to a game 3.
So that game played out the way that Andrew drew it up. He wanted to be aggressive. He wanted to be putting pressure on against interaction, and just always have creatures attacking, and he succeeded in that regard.
It almost feels like who has the board when Eric makes his first attack is what matters.
Yes.
When Eric gets to play Ass Zealot or Chandra's Phoenix on an uncontested board, it feels like that's a huge edge for him. And the reverse is also true. When Eric's already behind on the board, it feels like he can't use his mana in that way.
Yeah, I agree. And so this is very much an initiative-driven matchup, I think. Who has the play is a monumental edge here.
Yeah.
And so Eric is going to be on the play, I believe, for the first time this match, which will certainly help him out there. As you mentioned, he is going to get to attack with his Ash Zealots if they are to arrive on turn 2.
And again, only one in the main deck, 2 in the sideboard.
Okay. And then this is likely not a matchup where they would come in, I wouldn't think.
I don't know if that's true. I mean, a 2-power first striker is not that bad against Andrew's threat base. Yeah. I would imagine that they're more for, you don't see Ass Zealots in the sideboard a lot. I would imagine it's part of a plan of, I'm playing against a control deck, I need to get these Shocks and Searing Bloods out of my deck for just something.
Sure.
And Ass Zealot is the next best something after Fire Drinker Satyr.
Yeah, that's fair. My thinking would be, and this I think changes after game 2 when you see multiple Dryad militants, but my thinking would be that I'm against green-white. Green-white has typically multiple 3-powered 2-drops. So like your 2/2 first striker, yeah, it's good against Savannah Lion, but it's really bad against Watchwolf.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I wouldn't trust it for that reason. Boswell has the 4 Fleecemane Lions. He does not have any Call of the Conclaves. He has all 4 Loxodon Smiter and 3 Bremas as well. So as the game progresses, he certainly has several good roadblocks for a 2/2 first striker.
Yeah, maybe Eric's best plan here is just to be as non-interactive as possible. Chandra's Phoenix and Eidolon are kind of different animals because there's some guarantee to what they're going to be doing over the course of the game, almost no matter what Andrew presents. But cards like Ash Zealot that are predicated on the board being a particular way, maybe something that Eric wants to stay away from.
Yeah. Ash Zealot, it does not allow its user to stumble, is kind of a big problem as well. Yeah, an Eidolon of the Great Revel, if it shows up on turn 4, it still does its work, to some degree anyway. But yeah, Ash Zealots, if you were to say that you don't have a second red source, say that you have like Mountain Mutavault, then Ash Zealot, when it doesn't show up on turn 2, quickly starts to do nothing.
Yes.
So yeah, that's in addition to being non-interactive, I think there's something to be said for trying to avoid cards that can be dead.
I refer to it as an expiration date.
Okay.
And it's probably past turn 3.
Turn 2.5?
Yeah, that's the expiration date.
Fair.
The milk's gone bad.
Yeah. That should have been Ash Zealot's flavor text.
Yeah, you got one shot with this thing. It's turn 2.
That's fair. So, given that those Dryad militants did appear, and that should tell Eric that Boswell's list is a little different than the standard. Do you think he boards differently?
No, not necessarily. I think the only thing that might change is maybe Eric respects the possibility of Brave the Elements more than he would otherwise.
Okay,
that's really the only thing.
Sure.
I mean, there is Experiment 1, but that doesn't necessarily preclude having a card like Brave the Elements in the deck.
True. Yeah, what's the card? Not Stave Off. I can never. God's Willing. God's Willing was a card that kind of it saw a good amount of play. It actually kind of grew in popularity around the release of Born of the Gods in green-white decks. So that's a card that even the more token-oriented lists can have access to. That's a card he has to worry about. Ajani's Presence was freshly printed. That might be a card that matters. So I think even if you don't see Dryad Militant and don't kind of picture a stronger white bent, I think that the possibility of kind of 1-mana counter spells to interaction, that's something you have to be taking into consideration post-board.
Although, again, if Eric's entire plan is just, I'm going to ignore what you're doing on the board, that's another good way of playing around God's Willing and Brave the Elements.
Yeah, for sure. And the existence of those cards is just all the more reason for that to be your game plan, I think.
So Andrew here, taking a mulligan. not the end of the world because Eric's probably going to doing a fair bit of mulliganing himself with the bird going upstairs.
Are there mulligans in that sense? There's
They're somewhere in between. They're contextual mulligans.
Yeah, that's kind of the like newer players. I know that was kind of a long time stereotype of new players is that they would just go like mount and bolt you, and then the kind of the gentle scolding of that line is just like, look, that's a mulligan. You have one fewer card now.
Yeah, that was my progression as a player. As I would start off in 1996 going mount and bolt you. Then when I got halfway decent, I thought I should bolt at the end of the turn of turn 1. Then that's when I should bolt.
Okay.
And then I eventually realized when I got really good was when they could have spell pierce, so I am just supposed to go mount and bolt you. So that was the full circle.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. 1995 me had it the right way. 2002 me had it the wrong way.
All right. You just had to. It was kind of a there and back again situation. You had to.
My initial instincts were correct.
Yeah.
Maybe not for the right reasons.
You
but
had to climb to the top of the mountain to see why you were right all along.
Yeah.
That's fair. And traditionally, in a deck that just has like 4 lightning bolt and some creatures, then of course, using a burn spell just non-interactively that way is a mulligan. There's a reason that definition has stuck.
Yes.
But it's a burn deck, and they're certainly not mulligans. Like in a weird way, this is basically a combo deck where you have to resolve 6 spells.
Right. At the end of the match, all that happens is someone signs the slip.
Yes.
That's all that happens. So it doesn't really matter how you get there. You see, Andrew eventually decided to keep his 6-card hand, though he thought about it for a very long time. Opens the game with a Plains and a Dry Militant. That's met by shock.
Shocking.
And an untapped Sacred Foundry here from Eric. And Eidolon, a great start here for Eric.
And as you mentioned, if Eric gets to attack immediately with his threat, that is huge.
So you're going to see a Mana Confluence and a Voice of Resurgence. That's going to trigger the Eidolon.
So Boswell now taking damage from his lands and from his spells, which is not a great spot to be. If Eric has a way to get that Voice of Resurgence out of the way, it would only leave a 1/1 behind, which would leave an avenue for the Eidolon to attack. That's a line that I fully expect Eric to exploit if he has it available.
So now Eric deciding what he wants to do on his turn. It looks like another Eidolon in his hand, a couple removal spells for Voice of Resurgence. How does he want to proceed from here? Looks like he's going to start off by just attacking with the Eidolon, offering up trade with Voice of Resurgence.
Interesting. I think if I'm Andrew, I don't mind that at all. I mean, obviously it depends a little on my hand, but yeah, I would be eager to get that Eidolon out of the way.
Well, it's got to give you some pause here. Why is he willing to offer up the trade? Exactly for the reasons that you said. This seems like a really juicy block for Andrew, given the board state.
Yeah.
What would you assume is going on in Eric's hand if you're in Andrew's seat right now?
I would probably put him on Boros Charm, actually. Like, just trying to use, it's a weird use of a Boros Charm, but some kind of trick that lets him keep the Eidolon. I believe Eric's actual plan here is to kind of virtually keep the Eidolon by just replacing it, but...
So Andrew ultimately decides to block, and Eric with a backup Eidolon, no third land.
Yeah, I think Andrew can safely say some sort of interaction that lets him keep the Eidolon or replacement Eidolon, and I don't mind trading the front half of Voice of Resurgence for either of those.
All right, so Andrew here going to take another point of damage here off of Mana Confluence to cast Loxodon Smiter before combat. That's going to turn the Elemental token into a 2/2, and it comes across.
And now that there's a 4/4 in play, I feel like Eidolon of the Great Rebels' attacking days are numbered.
I mean, it's Chain of the Rocks or bust from here.
It is. Well, it's Chain to the Rocks or stay at home.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we're not in dire straits by any means. And it looks like, I believe Eric is missing his third land, so has plenty of options, but only gets to pick one.
And it's not clear any of those options can kill a Loxodon Smiter either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only option at 2 mana would be a Chain to the Rocks, or 2 mana or less, would be a Chain to the Rocks, and I'm willing to bet if he had it, he'd slam it here.
So there's an Ash Zealot here from Eric.
An Ash Zealot and pass.
The Eidolon triggers.
Yeah, the Eidolon being kind of a double-edged sword there is, it quickly starts being relevant. It kind of has an expiration date, as you say. Like, once you stabilize the board.
And here's the big hit here from Andrew, is his sideboard ace, Unflinching Courage, triggers the Eidolon, but Andrew doesn't care very much. That's a 6/6 life-linking, trampling Smiter coming across here. Eric's going to take it, and now he really needs to find Chain of the Rocks pronto.
Oh, yeah. That is a huge swing. Before there was a possibility that Eric could just ignore that creature and attack Boswell's life total a different way. But that option is no longer with us.
So Eric takes a draw here. Does not Chain of the Rocks. It's a copy of Magma Jet.
He now, I think, has to throw both his creatures under the smiter and then use a burn spell to get rid of it. That's a terrible feeling play. Like when you have to make that play, you're just like, this will never work. And you're still trading 3 for 2, but I just don't see how you can possibly win this game if you take another hit from that smiter.
Well, especially with Eidolon in play. I mean, Eric's going to just be locked out of casting spells altogether. So he is something of a bit of a rock and a hard place at this point.
Yeah. Now, the first time that Andrew attacks, Eric has the option of getting Eidolon out of play. So, and I have to assume that he'll do that. He can't. You're right. He actually just cannot take 6 because then he can't cast spells, and he's not winning this game without casting any other spells.
So we're going to see the writing's on the wall here that Eric's trying to cobble together some large block on the smiter. Interesting to see how Andrew wants to proceed from here. So here comes just the smiter, and that's a double block here from Eric.
I don't like this attack from Boswell. I obviously like attacking with the 6/6. I want to attack with that 2/2 as well. I don't see any possible play that Eric can make that doesn't involve both of those creatures going under the smiter. So that's just kind of two free damage that I think Boswell left behind there.
Eric just double blocks, falls to 6 from the trample damage. And now, can Eric start to rally here? Can he start picking apart this board? Here's an end turn Magma Jet.
Looks like that does resolve.
There's a third land in there. It is another Sacred Foundry.
Okay, so we see shock, and it looks like multiple shocks actually. So once this Magma Jet clears out the 6/6, the remaining shocks actually get rid of the rest of Andrew's creatures.
So tentatively stable board here for Eric. Takes a draw. He picks up the Sacred Foundry. He's going to cast shock on the elemental token. That resolves.
And
just passes back.
Gonna be patient with the other one. Maybe there wasn't another one. The funny thing about burn spells is they all kind of look the same.
So there is an attack from Experiment 1. No follow-up play from Andrew, flooding out a little bit here.
Oh, there's a lightning strike, I think, that I saw.
And there is a Searing Blood on the upkeep here from Eric. That's going to kill the Experiment 1.
Okay. So turn in the corner here a little bit.
The board is stable. Andrew with no follow-up play.
Wow.
It's pretty far away from getting burned out. He's gained so much life with that Unflinching Courage, but...
Yeah, for sure. And you're in a weird spot here if you're Eric, because I think you can't afford to just start throwing burn at the head yet.
And Eric draws the same conclusion that you just mentioned, just passes the turn, doesn't bother using the War Leader's Helix.
And Andrew's looking for spells. Any spell will do. That's a good one.
That's a really good one. Voice of Resurgence to play.
So this is a threat that, of course, demands 2 answers. Eric's sitting at 5. That's not very many. I think he just has to use 2 answers here.
Especially when your opponent could potentially have Unflinching Courage in hand.
Yeah, if your opponent just sits on 3 cards. It could be lands. We know that some of them are, but you have to suspect that they are, spells. And really the only spells that he wouldn't just jam there are the Unflinching Courages.
This feels like a spot where Eric really needs Chandra's Phoenix. Some repeating source of damage.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's a Spider from Andrew.
Which Eric does have the answer, but that's going to leave him out of gas.
Takes a quick gander at his graveyard.
Now, you mentioned that Unflinching Courage was something you might consider that your opponent could have in this spot. I think at this point you can safely assume that Andrew does not have Unflinching Courage because he would have just cast Loxodon Smiter and immediately put the pants on it.
So on the upkeep there, Eric uses the War Leader's Helix to take care of the Smiter. Again, no play from Andrew.
Yeah, gives him a little breathing room. Hey, there you go.
All right, there's Chandra's Phoenix. That's the start here. Knock Andrew down to 21.
So he's going to crawl back into this game.
Oh. Never mind, advent of the worm, end of turn here for Andrew.
Okay, that's that's a big play. That's another card that would have demanded 2 answers. Again, other than Chain to the Rocks, which is not actually a card we haven't seen all match from Eric.
So Andrew gonna take an untap. He draws.
And
starts off the turn with a Banishing Light on the Chandra's Phoenix.
that would have been another spell that would have been stuck in Boswell's hand.
And here's a Mondo combo, Unflinching Courage on a Worm token.
Not bad.
That's a 7 spot. That's going to take Eric down to 2, and now it's Chain of the Rocks or bust.
Yeah, and I think that Boswell held that Unflinching Courage at the spot where I said it would make sense that he would not have it because he would have just played it. But you actually kind of want your Unflinching Courage to have haste.
So Andrew Boswell there, 2-1 on the back of Unflinching Courage in the post-board games there. Takes down Eric Johnson with Red White Burn. Andrew able to survive a mulligan on the draw. Not an easy thing to do in this match.